What has your child done that is technically wrong but you were proud of them for doing it? 1. My son, who was 14 at the time, was robbed, at knife point, of his iPhone and a few dollars, by two older boys. They were 17 and 18. These boys were gang members, with many of the usual markings. One had a tattooed teardrop, indicating that he had taken a life, and a cross in the middle of his forehead. I saw his picture when they asked my son to identify who had done this to him. He looked pretty darn intimidating for a kid. This entire event was odd in as much as we live in an upper middle class suburb, and these things just don't happen here. Anyway, my son didn't seem to be suffering any trauma from the experience and went along seemingly happy-go-lucky. I actually thought he was in denial or suffering from PTSD. One day, I was driving through the main street of our town when I was stopped at a red light. My son jumps out of the car, without a word, and runs into the laundromat. I was confused, for a second, but then I see him beating the hell out of some guy. I mean, he was battering this kid, slamming him into walls and just pummeling his face with fists and elbows. But the time I got inside, he was stomping this kid out literally. The women inside were screaming and crying, and this kid was bloody and battered. I didn't recognize him right away, but the police soon arrived and it was then apparent that this was the kid that had robbed him. Surely, this was wrong, but I was never so proud. 2. Many years ago, my young son brought a letter home from school to inform me that he would be held in detention at school the following 2 evenings for hacking the school computer system. This sounded serious, so I asked him to explain. We were in computer class. I found a page that listed the names of the teachers. I clicked on one and a message popped up saying please enter password. So I typed password and a folder appeared that contained lots of file names. I turned to tell my teacher, but he was standing right behind me, staring at the screen. He took me to the headmaster, who said he would report it to you. He made me bring this letter. I wrote a reply to the headmaster, pointing out the obvious lack of security in the school computer system and hoping that he could issue an individual password to every teacher before the next school governor's meeting. I wasn't a school governor, but I doubted that he knew that. Further, I told him that my son would not be attending detention, would praise my son for discovering such a serious problem and saving the school from possible future embarrassment. I sealed the note in an envelope and told my son to deliver it to the headmaster next day, and to be sure to come home on time. Next day he came home from school on time, his little face beaming. Thanks, Dad. I don't know what you wrote, but the headmaster has been really nice to me. 3. When my son was age 5, he had an incident in his school's washroom. A fellow student would stick his head under the stall and watch my child doing his business on the toilet. After he complained to me about this, I suggested he tell this voyeur to stop immediately or else he would report him to the teacher. And what if that doesn't work? He asked me. Kick him in the face, I told him. When he said he could get in trouble for violence, I told him he had my permission to kick the shit out of anyone who disrespected his nudity. The very next day he came home with a huge smile on his face and told me he'd kick the kid in the head, who told on him. But the teacher punished the voyeur and let my kid off the hook. In a world where kids are told not to hurt others, it's important they are empowered enough to use self-defense in potentially abusive situations. 4. This was not my own child, but one of my children in my first headship in London. In year 6, the final year of primary school in the UK, I had a child who was really quite disturbed. The boy had no respect for women and girls and was also very anti-Semitic in a school, an area of North London, that was about 60% Jewish. I tried very hard to get him some support, but his parents totally denied that he had any issues, and it was impossible to persuade anyone that he had real problems other than being a bit overprivileged, rough or insensitive. I felt that he was probably seeing abuse at home, perhaps between mother and father, and he had certainly been raised in a very macho, male-dominated environment. I, the SEN coordinator, and all of his teachers throughout his time in school worked tremendously hard to support him, to engender some sort of compassion or empathy in him and to keep him from being resented and feared by other children. Towards the end of the year, another child, who did have recognized special needs, beat the first boy at a game of football. The first boy was never able to take losing, but was particularly chagrined to have been beaten by this particular boy. He made a very unpleasant slur against both the other boy's religion, Judaism, and his parents. He promptly came into my office to tell me what he had done with the words, "I know you are going to say that we mustn't ever hit people, but he has had that coming for a long time. I hit him once for all the Jews who could never fight back, and I hit him again for all the girls he frightens." I know I shouldn't say this, and I certainly did not at the time, but I was so proud of that boy. 5. My daughter lied. She was 3 years old when we put her in preschool, not uncommon in Nigeria. C. When she was 7 months old, we put her in daycare because we both worked. Now, the daycare center had a reading program for 5-year-olds, which my little princess found interesting. The carers would let her sit in the classes and she soon started to sound her phonics and learned short words from as early as the age of 2. So, fast forward a year when she was ready for actual preschool and we put her in with the 3-year-olds. She was not having it. They would doodle but she was drawing lines. They were being read to but she wanted to do the reading. They were taking naps when she wanted to learn. So, one day, the head of school was doing a walk around and visited her class. My little princess marched up to her and said, "I don't belong in this class. I'm 4 years old and I can read." When we came to pick her up, we were duly informed that a space had been created for our daughter in the 4-year-old's class. I tried to explain that she was only 3 and had not quite been truthful. The head of school answered, "Any child her age who can argue her case in such an articulate manner deserves what she asks for." So, Yeah, my daughter lied to get her class changed, and even though we gave the Don't Tell Lies lecture, I couldn't be more proud of her. 6. My kid head-butted another kid in line and was sent to the principal's office. Long story short, my daughter was in kindergarten. She's cute, rule-abiding, considerate and quiet, so most people think she's a pushover. She's never been one to hit or overreact. This little boy was teasing her, poking at her and wouldn't stop, although she told him to repeatedly. She tried to tell a teacher and the teacher said something to the extent of leave her alone and proceeded to ignore the situation. He put his face right up to hers and was yelling, so my daughter, out of options, headbutted him. He wailed and she was in horrible trouble. He had a bruise right in the center of his forehead. She explained everything and the principal told her that she was sorry, but my daughter would have to accept the consequences for headbutting a kid. I love the fact that my kid tried everything she had been told to do first, and when that didn't work, she ended the situation, quickly and with a minimum of fuss. I hope she keeps that. 7. My older son went to sleepaway camp one summer. He discovered that the camp store sold soda cans for $0.50 but that the counselor's bunk had a soda machine that gave out cans for $0.25. Officially the counselor's bunk house was off limits, but the counselors didn't care if he used the machine, so he made a business offering to get sodas for anyone who wanted one for $0.50 apiece, no extra charge for delivery. The next year he realized that the camp laundry was slow and some kids didn't bring enough underwear, so had to wash some by hand, which they hated and complained about. So he added a laundry service to his business model. There was another business during the school year charging friends to negotiate trades between the football teams at school. The first thing was against the rules, the second was just gross, the third finally got him in trouble at school but did result in a nice donation to charity. That all said, you can't get too angry with an unrepentant serial entrepreneur. Today the little miscreant is a successful business owner.